Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at AQA A-Level Psychology 2018 paper 2 exemplar answers for research methods, which you need to know for AQA A-Level Psychology. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Please note that these answers have been produced with knowledge of the mark scheme but have not been approved by the mark scheme themselves. There are 3 assessment objectives, AOs, in psychology. In this video they are color-coded. AO1 Knowledge, purple. AO2 Application, blue. AO3 Evaluation, red and green. A psychologist was reading an article about typical dream themes in adults. Figure 2 shows the main dream themes identified in the article. Figure 2 Main dream themes. Question 1. Using Figure 2, estimate the percentage of dreams that were reported to be about being chased. Shade 1 box only. 1 mark. A 4%. B 12%. C 27%. D 42%. C 27%. The psychologist was interested in finding out whether dream themes differed between males and females, particularly in terms of social interaction. She decided to conduct a pilot study. 20 undergraduate students, 8 male and 12 female, volunteered for the study. For a 6-week period, the students were interviewed at 9 a.m. each morning when they arrived at university. Interviewers, who did not know the purpose of the study, carried out and recorded the dream interviews. Question 2. What is meant by a pilot study? Explain one possible reason why the psychologist decided to conduct a pilot study for this investigation. 3 marks. A pilot study is a small-scale preliminary study, using a small number of participants, conducted before the main research. Pilot studies are conducted in order to evaluate the feasibility of the key steps in a future, full-scale project by identifying whether there are any problems with a study and whether any modifications need to be made to improve the research design. A pilot study may also give an early indication of whether the results will be statistically significant. One possible reason why the psychologist decided to conduct a pilot study for this investigation is to identify whether there needed to be any modifications in the design, e.g. whether the interview questions were sufficiently relevant to dream content. Question 3. The interviews produced qualitative data. What is meant by qualitative data? Give one strength of collecting qualitative data in this study. 2 marks. Qualitative data is non-numerical and descriptive data, displayed in words, images, videos, and sounds. It is based on subjective interpretation and retains details of actions, thoughts, and feelings. It has to be transformed and is only quantifiable if the data is put into categories and the frequency is counted. It aims to understand the social reality of individuals, groups, and cultures as nearly as possible as participants feel or live it. It can use open questions, in-depth observations and interviews, verbatim records or transcripts, non-verbal cues, contextual information, diary accounts, case study research and ethnography. A strength of qualitative data is that it is in-depth understanding. Qualitative data provides rich, detailed insights into people's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. This depth allows researchers to understand the context behind behaviors and decisions. Question 4. What are investigator effects? Suggest one way in which they could have been minimized during the dream interviews. 3 marks. Investigator effects occur when a researcher's expectations, beliefs, or preferences about the outcome of a study consciously or unconsciously influence the participants' actions, behaviors and responses, or the data collected through the researcher smiling, being enthusiastic, using a pleasant or unpleasant tone, or purposely making one condition easier or harder. One way in which they could have been minimized during the dream interviews is by providing a standardized script for the interviewers to use so that they all ask the same questions in the same way to avoid any bias in the students' responses. Question 5. Another researcher, who did not know the purpose of the study, carried out a content analysis of the interview data. Explain how this content analysis could have been conducted. 4 marks. A content analysis could have been carried out by identifying and devising important categories and themes from the interviews. The researcher should work through the transcribed conversations and repeatedly listen to segments of the recording. The researcher should then count and tally the number of occurrences of each of the categories and themes. Question 6. The psychologist wanted to assess the reliability of the content analysis. Explain how the reliability of the content analysis could be assessed. 4 marks. One way that the content analysis could be assessed for reliability is through test-retest reliability. The content analysis should be repeated on a second occasion using the same interview data. The 2 separate analyses, number of occurrences of each, should be compared. The researchers should then calculate the correlation between the 2 ratings. The researcher should accept 0.8 correlation, accept 0.7 to 0.9, between the test and the retest. When comparing the data for males and females, the psychologist found that there was a difference in the proportion of friendly and aggressive social interactions. This is shown in Table 2. Table 2 percentage of friendly and aggressive social interactions in dreams reported by males and females. Question 7. A total of 375 dreams reported by males included social interaction. Use the data in Table 2 to calculate how many of these dreams reported by males were classified as aggressive. Show your workings. 2 marks. 60 divided by 100 is equal to 0.60. 0.60 multiplied by 375 is equal to 225 dreams. Question 8. Draw a suitable graphical display to represent the data in Table 2. Label your graph appropriately. 4 marks. Appropriate title with reference to the for and the DV, accurately plotted data, bars must not touch, accurate y-axis label, percentage % is sufficient, accurate x-axis label with key, where necessary. The psychologist decided to conduct an experiment to investigate the effect of watching horror films before going to bed. A volunteer sample of 50 university students consented to take part in the experiment. The 50 students were randomly split into 2 groups. Group 1 watched a horror film before going to bed each night for the first week, then a romantic comedy before going to bed each night for the second week. Group 2 watched the romantic comedy in the first week and the horror film in the second week. When the students woke up each morning, each student received a text message that asked if they had had a nightmare during the night. They could respond yes or no. Question 9. Write a brief consent form that would have been suitable for use in this experiment. The consent form should include some detail of what participants might expect to happen, refer to ethical issues. Be in an appropriate format style. 6 marks. Dear participant, you are volunteering to take part in a psychological research study about the effects of watching films before going to bed. In this study, you will watch a horror film or a romantic comedy film every night for 1 week each before going to bed. When you wake up each morning, you will receive a text message from the researcher asking you a question, to which there will be a yes/no response. The study will last for 2 weeks. There is no pressure for you to consent, and your participation in this study is voluntary. You do have the right to withdraw your participation from the research study at any time without explanation, and that refusal to participate will not result in any consequences or any loss of benefits that you are otherwise entitled to receive. You also have the right to ask that any data you have supplied to be withdrawn. If you choose to participate in this study, the data that is collected from you will be kept confidential and your participation will be kept anonymous. You will also have the right to and should feel free to ask any questions about the study at any time. You will receive a full debrief at the end of the study. Please sign and date below if you agree to consent to participate in this study. Question 10. The psychologist proposed a directional hypothesis. Write a directional hypothesis for this experiment. 3 marks. The number of nightmares reported by participants will be significantly higher when participants watch horror films before bedtime compared to when participants watch romance films before bedtime. Question 11. The psychologist used a repeated measures design in this experiment. Explain why it was important to use a repeated measures design in this case. 2 marks. It was important to use a repeated measures design in this case because it is necessary to avoid the effects of individual differences in frequency of nightmares, as film viewing habits, gender, hours of sleep, personality, etc., can have a big impact on the number of nightmares recalled. Question 12. The psychologist used counterbalancing in this experiment. Explain why it was appropriate to use counterbalancing in this experiment. 2 marks. It was appropriate to use counterbalancing in this experiment because order effects are likely to occur, as if you saw the horror films in the first week you may still be thinking about them have higher levels of fear in the second week, resulting in more nightmares. Question 13. Explain how the psychologist could have randomly split the sample of 50 students into the 2 groups. 3 marks. All 50 participants should be given a number and all the numbers should be put into a hat. A number should then be drawn from the hat and should be assigned to the first group. A second name should then be selected as before but this time goes into the second group. This process continues until there are 25 in each group. The psychologist collated the responses of all the participants over the 2-week period and calculated the mean and standard deviation for each condition. Table 3 mean number of nightmares reported and the standard deviation for each condition. Question 14. What do the mean and standard deviation values in Table 3 suggest about the effect of the type of film watched on the occurrence of nightmares? Justify your answer. 4 marks. The mean values suggest that participants who watch horror films before going to bed report more nightmares than those who watch romantic comedies before bed. This is shown by the mean number of nightmares reported is greater when horror films are watched than when romantic comedies are watched. The standard deviation suggests that there is greater dispersion and variation in scores and spread of scores in the horror film condition than in the romantic comedy condition. This is shown by the standard deviation is greater when horror films are watched before going to bed than when romantic comedies are watched before going to bed. Question 15. The psychologist found that the difference in the number of nightmares reported in the 2 conditions was significant at p less than 0.05. Explain what is meant by significant at p less than 0.05 in the context of this experiment. 2 marks. This means that the difference in the number of nightmares reported after watching horror films compared to romantic comedies is significant at 0.05 level. This means there is less than 5%, 1 in 20, likelihood, probability, that the difference was due to chance due to something other than the 4. Question 16. The psychologist was concerned about the validity of the experiment. Suggest one possible modification to the design of the experiment and explain how this might improve validity. 3 marks. One possible modification to the design of the experiment include more than one question in the text message to the students. This might improve validity as this would make the aim of the experiment less obvious to guess, which would in turn reduce demand characteristics and improve the validity of the experiment. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.